The snow was falling hard over JFK Airport, burying the runway in white. But inside the cabin of Flight 402, the temperature was rising fast. Captain Arthur Sterling looked down his nose at the woman in seat 1A. She was wearing a faded hoodie, looked exhausted, and was black. In Arthur's mind, she didn't belong in first class, especially not on Christmas Eve when a VIP donor needed a seat. He gave her an ultimatum: move to the back or get off his plane. He thought he was clearing out trash. He didn't know he was talking to the woman who signed his paychecks, and she was about to ruin his entire life. The sliding glass doors of JFK Terminal 4 hissed open, letting in a gust of biting wind that smelled of jet fuel and frozen asphalt. It was Christmas Eve, 8 p.m. The airport was a chaotic ecosystem of panic and delay. The blizzard outside, dubbed Winter Storm Klaus by the media, was grounding flights up and down the East Coast, turning the departure board into a sea of red, cancelled text. Eleanor Vance pulled the hood of her oversized charcoal grey university sweatshirt tighter around her face. She adjusted her glasses, which were slightly fogged from the temperature change. To anyone passing by, she looked like a tired college student trying to get home for the holidays, or perhaps a weary nurse coming off a double shift. She carried a battered leather duffel bag that had seen better days, and her sneakers were wet with slush. No one looked at her twice. In the hierarchy of airport travel, she was invisible. She navigated the throng of stranded passengers sleeping on cots near the check-in counters. A young mother was pleading with a gate agent near the Delta desk, tears streaming down her face. Elena paused, her heart tightening. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against her phone. She could fix that. One call, and she could charter a plane for that woman. But not today. Today, Elena was on a mission of observation. She approached the gate for Sky Horizon Airways, Flight 402, bound for London Heathrow. "Boarding pass," the gate agent snapped without looking up. Her name tag read Jessica, and the dark circles under her eyes were visible even under the fluorescent lights. Elena held out her phone. The screen displayed a QR code for seat 1A, first class. Jessica scanned it. The machine let out a cheerful beep, and then she froze. She looked at the screen, then up at Eleanor, her eyes narrowing as she took in the hoodie and the wet sneakers. "You're in 1A?" Jessica asked, skepticism dripping from her voice. "Is there a problem?" Elena asked softly. Her voice was calm, possessed of a quiet authority that usually made people straighten up. But tonight, amidst the chaos, it went unnoticed. "No," Jessica sighed, handing the phone back with a flick of her wrist. "Just surprise, that's all. Usually that seat is reserved for corporate or high-tier platinum members. You got lucky with an upgrade?" "Something like that," Elena murmured. She walked down the jet bridge. The cold seeped through the thin metal walls of the tunnel. Elena wasn't just a passenger. 3 months ago, her investment firm, Vance Capital, had quietly acquired a majority stake in Sky Horizon Airways. The airline was failing, plagued by delays, poor service, and a reputation for treating economy passengers like cargo. Elena had stepped in to save it, but before she announced the restructuring and fired the incompetent board of directors, she wanted to see the rot for herself. She wanted to see how her employees treated the nobodies. She stepped onto the plane. The warmth of the cabin hit her. A flight attendant, a tall man named Marcus with a perfectly gelled side part, was greeting passengers. He offered a dazzling smile to the man in front of Eleanor, a businessman in a tailored beige trench coat. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Right this way. Champagne is already poured." Then Marcus looked at Elena. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of mild annoyance. He blocked the aisle slightly. Economy is through the galley and to the right, miss. Overhead bins are likely full, so you'll have to check that bag if it doesn't fit under the seat." Elena didn't move. She held up her phone again. "I'm in 1A. Marcus blinked. He took the phone, zoomed in on the ticket, and frowned. He looked at her bag, then back at the ticket. "I see. Right here, then." He didn't offer to take her coat. He didn't offer her a pre-flight beverage. He simply pointed at the plush leather seat and turned his back to greet the next passenger, a woman dripping in faux fur and diamonds. Elena sat down in 1A. The seat was comfortable, the leather soft, but the atmosphere was icy. She placed her bag at her feet. From her vantage point, she could see the cockpit door was open. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Arthur Sterling. Elena knew the name. When she bought the airline, his name had come up in several HR complaints that had been mysteriously swept under the rug. He was Sky Horizon's star pilot, a veteran with 30 years of flight time, a poster boy for the airline's glossy magazines. He was also, according to the rumors, a tyrant who believed the plane was his personal kingdom. Sterling was laughing loudly, talking to his co-pilot, a younger man named David. "I told her." Sterling's booming voice drifted into the first-class cabin. "If she can't handle the schedule, she shouldn't be a flight attendant. Christmas Eve is double pay. Stop crying about your kids." Elena stiffened. She pulled a small notebook from her hoodie pocket and made a note. "Captain Sterling, disregard for crew morale." 8:15 p.m. The boarding continued. The first-class cabin filled up. Next to Elena, the seat 1B remained empty. The businessman, Mr. Henderson, was in 2A. He was eyeing Eleanor with open curiosity, clearly wondering how someone dressed like her had afforded the seat next to him. Then, the final passenger arrived. It was the woman in the faux fur. She swept into the cabin like she was making a grand entrance at a ball. She was accompanied by a porter carrying 3 massive Louis Vuitton shopping bags. "Careful with those," she shrieked. "That's vintage." This was Mrs. Beatrix Calloway. Elena recognized her from the tabloids. A socialite known for throwing charity galas where very little money actually made it to the charity. Mrs. Calloway stopped at row 1. She looked at her boarding pass, 1B. Then she looked at seat 1A. She looked at Elena. Mrs. Calloway's lip curled in genuine disgust. She turned to Marcus, the flight attendant. "Excuse me," Mrs. Calloway said, her voice loud enough to silence the entire cabin. "There must be a mistake. I specifically requested privacy. I cannot sit next to this." She gestured at Elena with a manicured hand. Elena didn't look up. She kept reading the safety manual, her heart rate steady. This was exactly what she was here to see. Marcus, the flight attendant, looked panic-stricken. He knew who Mrs. Calloway was. She was a diamond tier flyer, the kind of passenger who could get a flight attendant fired with a single email to corporate. "Mrs. Calloway," Marcus soothed, lowering his voice. "The flight is fully booked. Christmas Eve, you know. Every seat is taken." "I don't care," Beatrix Calloway snapped. She dropped her heavy fur coat onto seat 1B, but she refused to sit. "I paid $7,000 for this ticket. I expect a certain caliber of environment. This person looks like she crawled out of a homeless shelter. It's unsanitary. I won't have it." Elena slowly lowered the safety manual. She turned her head and looked Beatrix Calloway in the eye. "I paid for my ticket just like you, ma'am," Elena said calmly. "And I showered this morning. Thank you very much." "Don't speak to me," Beatrix hissed. She turned back to Marcus. "Get the captain. Now." Marcus hesitated, then nodded. He hurried into the cockpit. Elena watched the interaction closely. A good captain would de-escalate. A good captain would support his crew and enforce the rules. A ticket is a ticket. A moment later, Captain Arthur Sterling emerged from the cockpit. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled from granite. He wore his uniform with obsessive precision, 4 gold stripes on his shoulder, wings gleaming on his chest. He exuded authority, but it was a cold, sharp kind of authority. He walked into the first-class cabin, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw Mrs. Calloway, who was fuming, and then he looked down at Eleanor. He didn't see a human being. He saw a hoodie. He saw messy hair. He saw skin color. He saw a problem to be solved so he could push back from the gate and get his bonus for an on-time departure. "What seems to be the problem?" Sterling asked, his voice a deep baritone that demanded silence. "Captain Sterling," Mrs. Calloway exclaimed, her demeanor shifting from aggressive to flirtatious. "Thank goodness. I was just telling this steward that I simply cannot sit here. I require the entire row. I have sensitive work to do, and I don't trust this person not to look at my papers or steal something." Sterling looked at Eleanor. "Let me see your boarding pass." It wasn't a request, it was an order. Eleanor held up her phone again. Sterling snatched it from her hand. He stared at the screen. Eleanor Vance, he read the name. It meant nothing to him. To him, Vance was just a name on a screen, not the name on the building the airline was headquartered in. "How did you get this ticket, Ms. Vance? Employee friends and family discount? Lottery win?" "I bought it," Elena said. "Online, just like everyone else." Sterling scoffed. He handed the phone back with a rough shove. He turned to Mrs. Calloway. "Mrs. Calloway is one of our most valued flyers. We accommodate our VIPs." He turned back to Elena. He leaned down, placing a hand on the back of her seat, invading her personal space. "Here is what's going to happen," Sterling said. "You're going to grab your bag. You're going to move back to economy. I believe seat 34B is open. It's a middle seat, but it gets you to London." The cabin was silent. Even the businessman in 2A had stopped drinking his champagne. "I have a ticket for 1A, Elena said, her voice hardening. "I am not moving." "This isn't a negotiation," Sterling said, his face reddening. He wasn't used to being told no, especially not by women who looked like they couldn't afford a bus ticket. "I am the captain of this aircraft. Under federal law, I have the authority to remove any passenger who disturbs the peace or threatens the safety of the flight." "I am doing neither," Elena said. "I am sitting in the seat I paid for. She," Elena pointed at Beatrix, "is the one disturbing the peace." "You are disturbing me," Beatrix shouted. Sterling straightened up. He adjusted his tie. He looked at his watch. They were 5 minutes from their scheduled pushback time. He had no patience for this. "Ms. Vance," Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I'm going to give you 10 seconds to stand up and move to row 34. If you do not, I will have you escorted off this plane by airport security. You will be placed on the no-fly list. You will be stranded in New York in a blizzard. Do you understand me?" Elena looked at him. She saw the arrogance in his eyes. He truly believed he was untouchable. He believed that because she looked poor, she was powerless. "You're making a mistake, Captain," Elena said. "The only mistake was letting you on my plane," Sterling retorted. 5 seconds. "I'm not moving." Sterling turned to Marcus. "Call the gate. Tell them to get Port Authority police down here. We have a non-compliant passenger. I want her off." Marcus looked terrified. "Captain, we'll lose our slot. If we wait for police, we'll be delayed an hour. The de-icing trucks are waiting." "I don't care," Sterling roared, causing several passengers to jump. "I am not flying this bird with her in the front row defying my orders. Call the police, now." Elena sat back. She crossed her arms. She felt the heavy weight of the situation. This was going to be messy. It was going to be public. And Captain Arthur Sterling had just signed his own professional death warrant. She watched Marcus pick up the interphone. She watched Mrs. Calloway smirk and settle into seat 1B, spreading her fur coat over the armrest as if she had already won. "You should have just moved, honey," Mrs. Calloway whispered to Eleanor. "Now you're going to spend Christmas in a cell." Elena didn't respond to her. She unlocked her phone. She didn't call the police. She opened her contacts and scrolled to a number, saved as Chief of Operations, Sky Horizon Global. She sent a single text message. "Flight 402, Gate B12. Bring the legal team, and bring the termination papers." Then she waited for the sirens. The cabin of Flight 402 had transformed into a theater of uncomfortable silence, the festive Christmas music playing softly over the PA system. Silent Night felt jarringly ironic against the tension radiating from the front of the plane. Captain Arthur Sterling stood at the cockpit door, his arms crossed over his chest, his face set in a mask of triumphant smugness. He wasn't just a pilot protecting his ship. He was a landlord, evicting a tenant he deemed unworthy. Elena sat perfectly still in seat 1A. She could feel the eyes of every passenger in the first few rows boring into her. The businessman in 2A, Mr. Henderson, looked like he wanted to say something. He shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. But a sharp glare from Sterling silenced him. No one wanted to be kicked off a flight on Christmas Eve. Fear was a powerful silencer. "They're coming," Mrs. Calloway whispered loudly, peering out the window. "I see the lights. Good riddance." 2 minutes later, the heavy thud of boots echoed down the jet bridge. 2 Port Authority police officers boarded the aircraft. They were large men, shaking the snow off their shoulders, their hands resting near their belts. They looked annoyed. Nobody wanted to deal with an unruly passenger call in the middle of a blizzard. "Who's the problem?" the lead officer asked, his voice flat. "Her," Sterling said immediately, pointing a thick finger at Elena. "Seat 1A. Refused a direct order from the captain to change seats. She's been belligerent, disruptive, and I have reason to believe she poses a security risk to my flight crew." The lie was smooth, practiced. Sterling knew exactly what keywords to use to trigger a police response. Security risk, belligerent. The officer turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, you need to grab your things and come with us." Eleanor looked at the officer. "I have a valid ticket for this seat. The captain is removing me because he wants to give my seat to his friend here." She gestured slightly to Mrs. Calloway. "She threatened me," Beatrix Calloway shrieked, jumping into the performance. "She told me she was going to make me pay. I don't feel safe sitting next to her." The officer sighed. He didn't care about the truth. He cared about protocol. Under aviation law, the captain was God. If the captain said a passenger had to go, the passenger had to go. The legal battles could happen later, on the ground. "Ma'am," the officer said, stepping closer, his hand reaching for his handcuffs. "Don't make this hard. Grab your bag. If you don't walk off, we drag you off. And if we drag you off, you go out in cuffs." Elena looked at Sterling. He was smiling. It was a cold, cruel smile. He thought he had won. He thought he was teaching a lesson to a nobody who had dared to step out of her station. "Very well," Elena said softly. She stood up. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She picked up her battered leather duffel bag. She adjusted her hoodie. As she stepped into the aisle, Mrs. Calloway laughed. "Finally. Maybe try the Greyhound bus next time, dear. It's more your speed." Elena paused. She looked at Mrs. Calloway, then turned her gaze to Captain Sterling. "Captain," Elena said, her voice clear enough for the first 5 rows to hear, "you are prioritizing your ego over your career. I suggest you enjoy this flight. It will be your last." "Get off my plane," Sterling sneered, and take your trash with you." Elena walked down the aisle. It was a walk of shame, designed to humiliate. As she passed the galley, she saw Marcus, the flight attendant. He was staring at the floor, unable to meet her eyes. He knew this was wrong, but he was too afraid of Sterling to speak up. "Merry Christmas, Marcus," Elena said quietly as she passed him. She walked out of the plane and into the freezing jet bridge, flanked by the two officers. Behind her, she heard the heavy aircraft door slam shut and the locking mechanism engage. She was stranded. She was humiliated. But as they walked up the ramp toward the terminal, Elena wasn't crying. She was checking her watch. 8:45 p.m. "You guys really picked the wrong night for this," Elena said to the officers as they entered the bright lights of the terminal. "Save it for the judge, lady," the officer grunted. "We're taking you to the airport holding station. You're being charged with trespassing and interfering with a flight crew." They marched her past the gate. Jessica, the gate agent, watched with wide eyes, her hand covering her mouth. The crowd of stranded passengers stared at Elena, the criminal being escorted away. Elena kept her head high. She knew something they didn't. The wheels of justice were already turning, and they were turning much faster than the engines on Flight 402. The holding room at JFK's Terminal 4 was a bleak, windowless box painted a depressing shade of beige. It smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. The officers sat Elena down on a metal bench. They didn't handcuff her to the rail. She had been calm, cooperative, but they stood by the door, blocking the exit. "Name?" the officer asked, pulling out a tablet to process her citation. "Elena Vance," she said. "Address?" "The penthouse, 432 Park Avenue, New York," she replied. The officer paused. He looked up from the tablet, scanning her faded hoodie and wet sneakers. He let out a dry chuckle. "Right, and I live at Buckingham Palace. Let's try again. Real address?" "That is my real address," Elena said calmly. "And before you process that paperwork, I suggest you look at the door." "Why?" "Because," Eleanor said, nodding toward the entrance, "I believe my lawyer is about to kick it open." As if on cue, the door to the holding room flew open with a bang. 3 men in immaculate, tailored Italian suits stormed into the room. The air in the room shifted instantly. These weren't just lawyers. These were sharks. Leading them was a man with silver hair and a face that had graced the cover of Forbes magazine twice. Julian Thorne, the chief legal officer for Vance Capital. Behind him was the airport duty manager, a man named Mr. DeMarco, who looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He was sweating profusely despite the winter chill. "Officer!" Julian Thorne barked, his voice booming. "Step away from my client immediately." The police officer blinked, confused. "Who are you? This is a restricted area." "I am Julian Thorne," he said, slapping a business card onto the metal table. "I represent Ms. Elena Vance, and you are currently detaining the owner of the airline you just dragged her off of." The silence that followed was absolute. The officer looked at the card. He looked at Mr. DeMarco. "Is this true?" the officer asked the manager. Yes, it's true," Mr. DeMarco stammered, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. "I just got the call from corporate. They bought the majority share 3 months ago. She owns 51% of Sky Horizon. She owns the plane." The officer's face went pale. He looked at Eleanor. The woman in the hoodie. The homeless woman. Eleanor stood up slowly. She brushed a piece of lint off her sweatshirt. "Mr. Thorne," Eleanor said pleasantly, "you made good time." "We were at the holiday party in Manhattan, Miss Vance," Julian said, bowing his head slightly. "We took the helicopter. Are you injured? Did they mistreat you?" "I'm fine," Eleanor said. She turned to the police officer. "Officer, You were doing your job based on false information provided by Captain Sterling. I don't blame you. However, I want the charges dropped immediately." "Dropped? Yes, of course," the officer stammered, deleting the file on his tablet. "Ms. Vance, I had no idea. The captain said—" "I know what the captain said," Elena cut him off. Her eyes were cold now. "Mr. DeMarco?" "Yes, Ms. Vance?" The airport manager stepped forward, trembling. "Where is Flight 402? It just pushed back from the gate, ma'am. It's taxiing to the de-icing pad. They are third in line for takeoff." Elena checked her watch. "Not anymore. Ground that plane." "Ground it?" DeMarco asked. "Ma'am, the cancellation costs. The slot fee. The passengers." "I don't care about the cost," Elena said, her voice hard as steel. "Contact air traffic control. Revoke Flight 402's clearance immediately. Tell them the owner of the aircraft is ordering an emergency return to the gate, and tell them to have airport security ready." "Security? For who?" DeMarco asked. "For the captain," Elena said. "He wanted to use police to solve a dispute?" "Fine. We'll play by his rules. I want him arrested for filing a false police report and endangerment of a passenger." "Consider it done," Julian Thorne said, already dialing a number on his phone. "And Julian," Elena added, "call the board of directors. Wake them up. I don't care that it's Christmas Eve. Tell them I'm calling an emergency meeting right here in the terminal. I want Sterling's flight logs, his HR file, and every complaint ever filed against him, printed and waiting for me by the time I get back to that gate." "Back to the gate?" the officer asked. Elena picked up her battered duffel bag. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of a predator who had been poked one too many times. "Yes," Elena said. "I have a flight to catch, and I believe seat 1A is waiting for me." She marched out of the holding room, her legal team flanking her like a phalanx of wolves. The invisible woman was gone. The billionaire had arrived. Captain Arthur Sterling was in a good mood. The nuisance in seat 1A was gone. The doors were armed, and Flight 402 was taxiing toward the runway. Outside, the blizzard howled, but inside the cockpit, the instruments glowed with the warm promise of a transatlantic journey. "Tower, Sky Horizon 402, holding short of runway 4 left, ready for departure," Sterling radioed, his voice smooth and professional. He waited for the clearance. He expected the usual, "cleared for takeoff." Instead, the radio crackled with a frantic urgency. "Sky Horizon 402, cancel takeoff clearance immediately. I repeat, cancel takeoff clearance. Stop your aircraft." Sterling frowned, slamming on the brakes. The massive Boeing 777 shuddered to a halt, the nose gear compressing. "Tower, say again. We are next in line. Is there debris on the runway?" "Negative, 402, the controller replied. "We have received a Level 1 priority order from airport operations. You are ordered to return to Gate B12 immediately. Do not pass go. Expedite." "Return to gate?" Sterling snapped, his face flushing red. "For what? We'll lose our de-icing holdover time. We'll be stuck here all night. What is the nature of the emergency?" There was a pause on the radio. Then a different voice came on, the supervisor of air traffic control. "The nature of the emergency, Captain, is an executive recall order. The owner of the aircraft has grounded the flight. Turn around, 402. Sterling froze. The owner? He looked at his co-pilot, David, who looked equally confused. "The owner is a corporation," Sterling muttered. "Some faceless board in a skyscraper. Why would they ground a full flight on Christmas Eve?" "Maybe a bomb threat," David whispered, his eyes wide. "Damn it!" Sterling hissed. He grabbed the PA mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. It seems We have a minor technical administrative issue to clear up. We have to return to the gate briefly. Don't worry, we'll have you back on your way shortly." Groans erupted from the cabin. In first class, Mrs. Beatrix Calloway rolled her eyes and poured herself another glass of champagne. "Unbelievable," she muttered to Mr. Henderson. "Probably that woman's luggage. They have to offload it. Good riddance." The plane lumbered back to the terminal. The snow swirled around the fuselage. As they approached Gate B12, Sterling noticed something odd. The jet bridge wasn't just waiting. There were police cars flashing their lights on the tarmac below, and standing in the window of the terminal, watching the plane pull in, was a small crowd of people in suits. The plane came to a halt. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Sterling stormed out of the cockpit. "Marcus," he yelled, "open the door. I'm going to go give the gate agent a piece of my mind. Whoever called this in is getting written up." Marcus, looking pale and nervous, disarmed the door and swung it open. Sterling stepped forward, ready to shout, but the words died in his throat. Standing at the end of the jet bridge wasn't a gate agent. It was Eleanor Vance. She was still wearing the hoodie, but she was no longer holding her bag. It was being held by a man in a suit. Flanking her were the two police officers who had dragged her off, looking sheepish and apologetic. Behind her stood Julian Thorne, the company lawyer, holding a thick file folder. Elena walked down the jet bridge. Her stride was different now. It wasn't the walk of a tired traveler. It was the walk of a woman who owned the concrete beneath her feet. She stepped onto the plane. The cold wind from the open door swirled into the cabin, chilling the heated air. "You," Sterling stammered, his brain struggling to catch up. "How? Why are you back? I told you—" "You told me to get off your plane," Eleanor interrupted, her voice projecting through the silent first-class cabin. "So I did. And then I remembered something important." She stepped closer to him, invading his space just as he had done to her. "I remembered that I bought this airline 3 months ago." A gasp rippled through the cabin. Mr. Henderson in 2A dropped his fork. Mrs. Calloway froze, her champagne glass halfway to her mouth. "I am Elena Vance," she said, raising her voice so the passengers in economy could hear. "CEO of Vance Capital and the majority shareholder of Sky Horizon Airways. And you, Captain Sterling, have just made the biggest mistake of your life." Sterling laughed. It was a nervous, incredulous sound. "You're lying. You're just a crazy woman in a hoodie. Officer, arrest her. She's impersonating—" Julian Thorne stepped forward. He didn't shout. He simply held up a document embossed with the Sky Horizon corporate seal. "Captain Arthur Sterling," Julian read aloud, his voice dry and legalistic. "This is a notarized copy of the Articles of Incorporation. Ms. Vance is the chairwoman of the board. Technically, she is your supreme commander, and you just had her arrested for sitting in her own seat." Sterling looked at the document. He saw the seal. He saw the name. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a ghost. His knees actually buckled, and he had to grab the galley wall for support. "Miss Vance," Sterling croaked. I didn't know. The uniform, the hoodie. You thought I was poor," Elena finished for him. "You thought I was weak, and because of that, you thought I didn't deserve respect." She reached out and took the folder from Julian. She opened it. "I had my team pull your file while the plane was taxiing," Elena said. "It's interesting reading, Arthur. 3 sexual harassment complaints in 2023, 5 reports of verbal abuse toward co-pilots, and a formal reprimand for skipping pre-flight safety checks to make up time. The old management covered for you because you were marketable. But I'm not the old management." Elena looked him in the eye. Arthur Sterling, you are relieved of command, effective immediately. You are fired for cause, citing gross misconduct, discrimination, and endangerment of the airline's reputation. You can't do this, Sterling whispered. I have a pension. I have 30 years. You have nothing, Elena said. My lawyers are filing a civil suit against you for the false police report you just filed. You'll spend your pension on legal fees. She turned to the police officer. Officer, I'd like to press charges now. False reporting. Harassment. Yes, ma'am, the officer said. He stepped forward, pulling out his handcuffs. Arthur Sterling, turn around. The passengers watched in stunned silence as the arrogant captain, who had strutted through the cabin like a king only an hour ago, was handcuffed and marched off the plane in front of everyone. Elena didn't watch him go. She turned her attention to seat 1B. Mrs. Beatrix Calloway was shrinking into her fur coat, trying to become invisible. Mrs. Calloway, Elena said pleasantly. Beatrix jumped. Miss Vance, oh my God, I had no idea. You know, it was the captain. He instigated everything. I was just confused. I would be honored to sit next to you. We can discuss charity? Elena smiled. I don't think so. She motioned to Marcus, the flight attendant. Marcus, Elena said, what is the company policy regarding passengers who verbally abuse other passengers? Marcus straightened up. He looked at Mrs. Calloway, then at Elena. A smile broke across his face. They are to be removed from the aircraft and placed on the permanent no-fly list, Miss Vance. Excellent, Elena said. Mrs. Calloway, grab your Louis Vuitton bags. You're leaving. You can't do this, Beatrix shrieked, her facade crumbling. I am a Diamond member. I know people. I own the airline, Elena said simply, and I don't want your money. Get off. Beatrix looked around for support, but the other passengers, the ones she had delayed and annoyed with her drama, started to clap. First it was just Mr. Henderson, then the woman behind him, then the economy cabin joined in. A slow, rhythmic applause filled the plane as Mrs. Calloway, red-faced and sputtering, gathered her bags and stormed off the plane, trailing insults behind her. Elena stood in the aisle. The cabin was quiet again, but the energy had changed. The fear was gone. She turned to Marcus. I saw you try to help me earlier, Elena said. I saw you hesitate because you were afraid of Sterling. I understand that fear. But I need leaders who do what's right, not what's easy. Marcus looked down. I'm sorry, Miss Vance. I should have done more. You're going to get the chance, Elena said. I'm promoting you. Effective tomorrow, you are the new head of in-flight customer experience for the entire fleet. I want you to rewrite the training manual. No one, no matter what they wear or who they are, gets treated like I was today. Can you do that? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Good, Elena said. She looked at the empty cockpit. Now, does anyone know how to fly a 777? Because we are currently down a pilot. The co-pilot, David, poked his head out. I can fly her, Ms. Vance, but I need a captain to sign off. I have a reserve captain on standby, Julian Thorne said, checking his phone. Captain Miller, she's at the airport hotel. She can be here in 20 minutes. Get her, Elena said. She sat back down in seat 1A. She kicked off her wet sneakers and put on the complimentary slippers. She looked at the empty seat next to her, where Beatrix had been. She placed her battered duffel bag on it. Finally, she whispered, some legroom. The transition from the chaotic reign of Captain Arthur Sterling to the command of Captain Sarah Miller was like stepping out of a hurricane and into a calm, sunlit glade. But for Elena Vance, the flight to London was not a time for rest. It was the beginning of a war. As Flight 402 finally pierced the cloud layer and leveled off at 35,000 feet, the atmosphere inside the Boeing 777 shifted from fear to a buzzing, electric curiosity. The invisible woman in seat 1A had become the sun around which the entire aircraft orbited. Elena ordered the cabin lights to be raised slightly. She stood up, turning to face the passengers of first class and the business cabin behind them. "May I have your attention?" Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The cabin went silent. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. "I want to apologize," Elena began. "Not for what happened to Captain Sterling. He earned his fate. But for the distress you all felt while he was in command. You paid for a service, and you were treated to a hostage situation. That ends now." She motioned to Marcus, who was standing by the galley with a look of awe on his face. "Marcus," Elena said, "open the reserves. The vintage Dom Perignon, the caviar service. Everything usually reserved for diamond tier members like Mrs. Calloway. Tonight, every single person on this plane, from 1A to 45C, is a VIP. Everything is complimentary." A cheer went up from the economy cabin that was so loud it could probably be heard in the cockpit. Mr. Henderson, the businessman in seat 2A, shook his head in disbelief. "You're giving away $50,000 in inventory, Miss Vance." Elena sat back down and pulled her laptop from her battered bag. "Mr. Henderson, I just saved the company millions by removing a liability in the cockpit. Consider this a marketing expense." For the next 6 hours, Elena didn't sleep. While the passengers enjoyed the feast, she worked. She connected to the plane's Wi-Fi and began drafting the emails that would dismantle the old guard of Sky Horizon Airways. She wrote termination notices for the HR director who had buried Sterling's harassment files. She drafted a press release. She messaged Julian Thorne, who was already on the ground in New York, coordinating the legal offensive. By the time the wheels touched down at Heathrow in the grey morning light, the world had already changed. The video recorded by the passenger in row 3, a teenager named Leo, who had a modest following on TikTok, had gone nuclear. The clip, titled "Pilot Kicks Off Black Woman," turns out she owns the plane, had jumped from TikTok to Twitter and from Twitter to CNN. As the plane taxied to the gate, Elena's phone blew up. Missed calls from the New York Times, BBC, and Wall Street Journal. Captain Miller's voice came over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. On behalf of Miss Vance and the new Sky Horizon family, we thank you for flying with us. And we have a bit of a reception committee outside." Elena looked out the window. The tarmac wasn't just filled with baggage handlers. There were news vans parked beyond the perimeter fence, their satellite dishes pointed at the plane. Elena put her hood up. She wasn't hiding. She was branding. While Elena was navigating the media storm in London, Arthur Sterling was sitting in a holding cell in Queens, New York. The reality of his situation hadn't fully sunk in yet. He was still operating on the delusion that he was Captain Sterling, the untouchable ace of the skies. His union representative, a tired-looking man named Frank Russo, walked into the interrogation room. Frank didn't look happy. He didn't even sit down. "Get me out of here, Frank," Sterling barked, though his voice wavered. "This is a misunderstanding. She provoked me. It's entrapment. I want to counter-sue for wrongful termination and emotional distress." Frank Russo threw a file onto the metal table. It slid across and hit Sterling's handcuffed hands. "There is no countersuit, Arthur," Frank said quietly. "The union isn't touching this." "What?" Sterling gasped. "I pay my dues. You have to defend me." "Defend you?" Frank laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Have you seen the internet, Arthur? You're the most hated man in America right now. The video has 80 million views. You can hear you calling her trash. You can hear you ordering the police to drag her off. There is no context where you look good." Frank leaned in close. "Vance Capital just sent over the digital forensics from your flight logs. They found the times you falsified duty hours. They found the off-record naps in the cockpit. They have affidavits from 3 flight attendants you grabbed in 2022. The DA isn't just charging you with filing a false police report. They're looking at federal charges for compromising flight safety." Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. "But my pension." "Gone," Frank said. "The morality clause in your contract is ironclad. Sky Horizon is suing you for damages to their brand. They are asking for $5 million. You're going to lose your house in the Hamptons. You're going to lose your boat. You're done, Arthur. You'll be lucky if you don't do jail time." Frank turned to leave. "Wait!" Sterling screamed, rattling his cuffs. "Who's flying my plane? Who took 402? Frank paused at the door. "Sarah Miller, and she got it there 10 minutes early." The door slammed shut, leaving Sterling alone, with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the crushing weight of his own arrogance. The karma that hit Beatrix Calloway was different. It wasn't legal, it was social, which for her was a fate worse than death. Beatrix had stormed off the plane thinking she could spin the narrative. She had called her publicist from the back of an Uber, demanding they release a statement saying she was the victim of an aggressive passenger. But the internet is a cruel detective. By the time Beatrix got to her Upper East Side apartment, the internet sleuths had identified her. They found her charity, the Calloway Foundation. They dug into its tax records. Within 48 hours, an expose was published on a major news site, The Fraud in Fur, how the woman from Flight 402 spent charity money on galas and Gucci. It was revealed that only 4% of the donations to her foundation actually went to orphanages. The rest went to administrative costs, which included her travel, her wardrobe, and her dinners. Elena Vance didn't even have to lift a finger for this part. She simply watched from her hotel room in London as the dominoes fell. Beatrix's husband, a quiet hedge fund manager who hated publicity, filed for divorce 3 days later. He cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew he was cutting a toxic asset loose to save his own reputation. The final blow came a week later. Beatrix tried to enter Le Coucou, an exclusive French restaurant in Manhattan where she had a permanent table. The maitre d', a man she had tipped poorly for years, stopped her at the door. "Mrs. Calloway," he said loudly, in front of a line of patrons. "I'm afraid we cannot seat you." "Do you know who I am?" Beatrix hissed, trying to summon her old power. "Yes," the maitre d' smiled. "We all saw the video, and the owner has a strict policy. No trash allowed." Beatrix turned and fled, the laughter of the line following her down the cold New York street. 6 months passed. The snow had melted, giving way to a humid New York summer. Elena Vance walked through the sliding glass doors of JFK Terminal 4. This time, the atmosphere was different. The Sky Horizon check-in counters had been remodeled. The dreary beige walls were now a vibrant blue. But the biggest change was the people. The staff looked happy. They were smiling, not with the forced grimaces of terrified employees, but with genuine energy. Elena approached the counter. She wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. She was wearing a simple blazer and jeans. She was still low-key, but she didn't need to hide anymore. Jessica, the gate agent who had been so tired on Christmas Eve, was there. She looked different, rested, her hair styled, a new supervisor pin on her lapel. "Good morning, Miss Vance," Jessica beamed. "Heading to Tokyo today?" "I am," Elena smiled. "How are the numbers, Jessica?" "On-time departure is up 15%. Jessica rattled off the stats proudly. "Customer complaints are down 60%. And We actually have a waiting list for flight attendant positions now. People want to work here." "That's what I like to hear," Elena said. She walked through security. TSA agents nodded respectfully as she passed and made her way to the gate. Waiting for her at the jet bridge was Marcus. He wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. He was the director of in-flight standards. He wore a tailored suit, but he still had that warmth that had made him stand out on that fateful night. "Miss Vance," Marcus said, extending a hand. "Plane is prepped. Captain Miller is in the cockpit. She requested to fly you personally." "She's a good pilot," Elena said. "And you, Marcus, how is the new training program going?" "It's tough," Marcus admitted. "We had to let go of about 20 senior pursers who refused to adapt. They wanted the old days back. But the new recruits, they get it. They understand that every passenger has a story." They walked down the jet bridge together. "You know," Marcus said, lowering his voice, "I got a letter from Arthur Sterling yesterday." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "He's working at a logistics warehouse in New Jersey. Night shift. He wanted me to put in a good word for him. Said he's learned his lesson and wants to fly cargo." "And what did you do?" Elena asked. Marcus stopped. He looked at the plane. His plane. "I sent it back. I wrote a note on it. I said, 'We don't hire people who judge books by their covers. Try Greyhound.'" Elena laughed. It was a genuine, happy sound. "Ruthless, Marcus. I love it." Elena boarded the plane. She walked past row 1. "Miss Vance?" Marcus asked. "1A is open." Eleanor paused. She looked at the plush leather seat where it all began. The seat where she had been humiliated, judged, and ordered to move. "No," Eleanor said. "Give 1A to that soldier I saw in the waiting area. The one with the leg brace. He looks like he needs the leg room." "And where will you sit?" Marcus asked, confused. Elena slung her bag over her shoulder and pointed toward the back of the plane. "I'm going to sit in 34B, she said. "The middle seat in economy?" Marcus asked, horrified. "Miss Vance, you own the airline. You can't sit in the middle seat." Eleanor turned to him, her eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and wisdom. "Marcus, the only way to make sure the middle seat is comfortable is to sit in it yourself every once in a while. If I lose touch with what it feels like to be back there, I become Arthur Sterling. And I promised myself I would never let that happen." She walked down the aisle, greeting passengers as she went. She found row 34. The passengers in 34A and 34C looked up, surprised to see the CEO squeezing in between them. "Hi," Elena said, shoving her bag under the seat in front of her. "I'm Elena. I hope you don't mind sharing the armrest." As the plane took off, soaring over the Manhattan skyline, Elena Vance closed her eyes. She didn't feel like a billionaire. She didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a traveler, just one of hundreds of souls hurtling through the sky, connected by the shared faith that they would land safely. She had proven her point. She had cleaned house. But more importantly, she had turned a vessel of exclusion into a vessel of unity, and as the beverage cart came down the aisle and the flight attendant asked her if she wanted water or soda, Elena smiled. "I'll take a ginger ale," she said, "and keep the change." The downfall of Captain Arthur Sterling and Mrs. Beatrix Calloway serves as a brutal reminder that character is revealed not in how we treat our superiors, but in how we treat those we perceive as lesser. They saw a hoodie and assumed weakness. They saw skin color and assumed poverty. Their prejudice blinded them to the reality that the woman they were abusing held the keys to their entire existence. Elena Vance didn't just fire a bad employee. She dismantled a toxic culture. She proved that true leadership requires getting in the trenches, or in this case, the middle seat, and that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one who doesn't feel the need to announce their power. In a world obsessed with image, Elena Vance showed that substance always wins, and that sometimes the hardest hit comes from the hand that writes the checks. If this story of ultimate karma and justice satisfied you, please smash that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. What do you think about Elena's decision to sit in the middle seat at the end? Was it necessary, or just a power move? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories about arrogant people getting exactly what they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. I have a new story coming next week about a landlord who tries to evict a tenant, only to find out the tenant is the bank manager holding his mortgage. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching.